this is not going to be the David De Gea press conference. There's so much focus on the Manchester United goalkeeper, with, of course, Dean Henderson doing so well at Sheffield United. What was said and what are your thoughts on that whole goalkeeper situation? Who's going to be United's number one for the first Premier League game next season?
I think David De Gea will be the number one for the first Premier League game of next season. It was interesting, actually, because at the start of the post-lockdown period, De Gea made quite a significant error in the draw at Tottenham. And after the game, and also in the press conference for the game afterwards, Solskjaer was asked about De Gea, and that's when he came out with the statement that De Gea is the best goalkeeper in the world. He's got no doubts about him. He was very complimentary about him. Today, he was very much on his own kind of lockdown because he said that he didn't want it to be a David De Gea press conference. He didn't want all the questions to be about David De Gea. He knew that David De Gea would just get on with his job, and he didn't want any more pressure on David De Gea. So it's an interesting dynamic that's changing. But overall, I think that Solskjaer still has a lot of faith in De Gea. I think the Dean Henderson thing is interesting. My personal view is that Henderson will go back out on loan to Sheffield United next season and De Gea will stay. I think we are coming to a point where Manchester United will have to make a long-term decision about who is going to be their goalkeeper.
Simon, this is quite key with their top goalkeeper. Do you sense there's a little bit of Sir Alex Ferguson about the way that he's handling it? We've seen over the years lots of cases where Sir Alex has had to defend players like Varane, for example, from the deluge of questions that have come with poor performances.
It almost felt, Darren, as though Ferguson was speaking, apart from the fact that Solskjaer clearly doesn't have the same number of trophies or the same background, but they were very much words that you could have imagined Sir Alex Ferguson saying. It's about the team, and he's not going to allow individual players to get almost the narrative around them to take over the job that he's trying to do. And Solskjaer, for all that Manchester United were really, really disappointing on Sunday against Chelsea, for all it's a trophy that's gone begging. If you were to ask the people at the club, what do they want more? Do they want to get to an FA Cup final or even win the FA Cup? Or do they want to get back into the Champions League? Well, the answer is get back into the Champions League. And basically, they need a draw against West Ham tomorrow night, and that will mean that they can go into that final game against Leicester knowing that a draw would take them back into the Champions League. That is what the club's focus is on. It was very clear today was what Solskjaer's focus is on, and he's not wanting anything to overtake that, and that includes us, the media, talking about his goalkeeper, who he admitted on Sunday had made mistakes.
Yeah. Wonder what the reaction would be, Simon, from the Manchester United fans if tomorrow night Ole Gunnar Solskjaer left the goalkeeper out. Do you think the United fans are at the point with him where they still trust him, believe in him 100%, or do you think now, after 400 plus games, they're at that point where maybe it's time for somebody else to put the gloves on?
Well, I certainly think, Andy, that if Sergio Romero played tomorrow, that there would be a significant minority probably of Manchester United fans who would think, yeah, I can understand why he's done that. And yeah, after the mistakes he's made, I can understand why De Gea's not in the team. But I think that would be such a massive decision. And I think a lot depends on David De Gea's mental state. It's funny, really, because clearly anybody who's been aware of Manchester United for any length of time will remember Sir Alex Ferguson dropping his goalkeeper, Jim Leighton, after an FA Cup final for the replay. And I was looking back in Ferguson's autobiography, actually, yesterday, and in that he recounts the reasons that he made the decision. And basically it was because he looked at De Gea after the FA Cup final, and he said in his words, he saw a beaten man, he saw somebody who was ground down and overcome by the stresses that he was encountering. And I think that's very much what Solskjaer will be looking at, and there's somebody on Solskjaer's backroom staff, Mike Phelan, who played in that FA Cup final in 1990. So I think they'll be looking at De Gea's mental state and trying to work out whether he's in the right frame of mind to play tomorrow. And this is what we were trying to get from Solskjaer today. This is what we were trying to unearth, really, because we knew there was no point asking him whether De Gea was going to play. And that's what Solskjaer wasn't going to get into. And as I say, that was very much kind of Alex Ferguson way of dealing with it. Whatever issues there are, he wants to address them behind closed doors. I think, going back to the point, I think there would be people who think, yeah, I can understand why Sergio Romero's playing tomorrow, but I don't think that will happen. I don't suspect that is in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's mind at the moment.
Simon, you mentioned that Spurs press conference just after the lockdown. You and I were at that press conference. Since then, obviously, as you say, the landscape's changed. Who do you think's under more pressure over this, De Gea or Solskjaer?
Well, that's a really good question. And I would say they're both under... Well, if anything, I suppose Solskjaer's under the most pressure, because if he calls it wrong, then the consequences for Manchester United are enormous. If David De Gea plays, well, he will back himself, I'm sure, to play well. And if he makes a mistake, well, he'll lose his place. But, for Manchester United, the consequences of not being in the Champions League next season, as I say, are enormous. But we all know the finances that come with it. But there's also a 22.5 million pound repayment, or a withdrawn payment or withheld payment Adidas would make as part of their 10-year contract with United. So the consequences of failure are huge. And Manchester United, although most of this season nobody's really expected them to be in the Champions League, they've got into a position where it's in their hands now. And I think that, the expectation is that United will go on and finish in the top four, and we'll just see whether that's how it transpires, because the gap has been opened for them once already, and they didn't quite take it. So now they've got to take advantage of the situation they find themselves in, given Leicester have been so poor recently.
Yeah, you talk about loyalty. David De Gea started every game in the Premier League under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Just finally, Simon, before we let you go, I've seen you wandering around the BBC offices with a little black leather book, and I know all the secrets are in there. So just telling all our people watching around the world, Manchester United fans, what can they expect this summer in terms of transfers? There's a lot of excitement about Jack Grealish. Jadon Sancho is a name that's been mentioned. Who's coming into Old Trafford?
Well, there's no doubt that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would like Jadon Sancho. There's no doubt that Manchester United think they can get Jadon Sancho. I think they believe that Jadon Sancho wants to come back to England, and I can understand that as well. The information I'm getting out of Dortmund is that they're not willing to drop their asking price, and their asking price is around £100 million. Now, whether in light of Jude Bellingham signing this week, whether in light of Erling Haaland signing for them in January, this is a bit of bravado on Borussia Dortmund's part, and they do have to drop the asking price. Well, that will remain to be seen, and that will be discovered, I suppose, once the transfer window opens. Bearing in mind that the German season's been finished quite a long time anyway, it may be something that doesn't become apparent until after United have finished their season, which could be at the back end of August. I would also expect that United would be pushing to try and find a centre-half from somewhere, and we all know the names that get bandied about: Koulibaly, Napoli, Nathan Ake, but we know the same clubs, Manchester City would be among them, trying to get these players as well. I would imagine there will be 2 or 3 new players. Jadon Sancho is the one they really want, though.
Top man, Simon, always good to speak to you on the programme. That's Simon Stone from BBC Sport. And this, then, is the run-in for Manchester United, for Leicester and for Chelsea. Those teams going for the Champions League spots. Chelsea, Liverpool, Wolves on the final day. Manchester United for Leicester at the King Power, their last game in the Premier League this season. And West Ham on Wednesday for United. And, of course, that game against Leicester, Frank Lampard, your old club, Chelsea, Andy said that it's 3 finals for them to get them over the line. Can you see them securing that Champions League football?
I can. Yeah, I can. I think Frank's done really well. I've been very impressed with the way he's marshalled his team, steered his team through a really difficult spell, and I think also the way that he's acquired the likes of Timo Werner and Hakim Ziyech and others, perhaps, as we speak.
Kai Havertz, potentially.
Yeah, the way that he's been involved in them is quite clear that he's been heavily involved with some of those. So, yeah, I've been really impressed with how he's done it. I think that it's not easy to do, even for a rookie manager.
Yeah.
And he's still in that bracket, even though he's had his spell at Derby, he's still in that bracket as a Premier League boss. Not easy, but I think he's done very well. And I do believe they'll play Champions League football. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. Top 4 or the FA Cup. If you had to pick, what would they be going for? They want
Top
both,
4.
obviously. Top 4.
I think, listen, ideally they'd want both, but top 4, with the revenue that comes with playing in the Champions League, the big players you can attract. Chelsea are a club that sees itself as a Champions League club and not a Europa League club. And I think that would have been his brief at the start of the season. As you say, I think he's done superbly well, not just to handle a big club, but also the big pressure that comes with handling a big club. And he's dealt with it particularly well in the public spotlight, the issues that he's had with Kepa, with contract situations, with the lack of goals and having to recall and energise Olivier Giroud after he'd spent most of the first half of the season in the shadows while Tammy Abraham was ripping it up. Suddenly he's in and he's flying, Willian flying. Defensively, the problems they've had, they conceded more goals than any other side in the top 6 so far this season.
Yeah.
And yet he is still the master of his own destiny.
I think as well, Darren, I think Frank knows what he doesn't want.
Yes.
The players at that club that he's got there at the minute, that
Is Kepa one of those?
he doesn't want to see him coming back. Could well be the goalkeeper. The problem with the goalkeeper is they pay so much money for him. His finding is recouping a sensible amount out of that deal, because you're not going to get that. But I think the likes of Jorginho, it looks like since restart he's done. Looks like I think he's going to be moving on to pastures new. And full-back has been a bit of an issue. Left-back, whether it be Emerson or Alonso, playing over there. Can't have Azpilicueta there at the start of next season. They need to address that. Probably another centre-half, someone who can be their absolute leader. I think Rudiger does well at times, but I get the impression that Frank's not convinced totally by anything back there, and that he'd like to address that this summer. But I think that's what he's done particularly well, focusing not only what you want and acquiring those, but also making sure you're adamant about the ones that you don't want coming back for pre-season.
Yeah.
I think I look at the way that they performed in the FA Cup semi-final. They were clinical in front of goal. They were quick and decisive as well in their counter-attacks. I think if you look at that back 5, because I don't think he will keep Kepa. I was at Crystal Palace where Kepa made mistakes at 2-0 up for Chelsea that could have cost them the match. And I think that's been ongoing for a long period of time. And for a goalkeeper that really humiliated Maurizio Sarri, Lampard's predecessor in the League Cup final, you would have thought that he would be producing the form that would demand a regular first-team place. But if there was better, he'd be playing. And I think as far as Kepa's concerned, think they'll look to replace him. I agree. I think they'll look at Chilwell from Leicester for the left-back slot. And with Barkley and Loftus-Cheek in midfield as well, they've got some very good quality in those positions.
OK, there we go. So, of course, Liverpool picking up the Premier League trophy as well, aren't they, in that game? So much to look forward to tonight. Watford against Manchester City.